So they want us to become homogenized without giving us the opportunity or even recognizing that there is a difference between our experiences here. And my question is, how do we not only avoid that, right? I think it's pretty easy to avoid that, but where do we go from here? Because there are constant pressures of assimilation, and we're being assimilated unequally.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we're seeing it. I know we're supposed to talk about politics, but I think we see a lot of it. We're seeing shades of it, for lack of a better term. We're seeing shades of it with the Clinton campaign, right? We see them absorbing a certain type of black people, right? A certain people who are willing to sign on at any cost to be within those structures, right? So it's kind of I didn't want to go here, but it's kind of creepy when you think about it. To my mind, it's kind of creepy that you have to act a certain way and be a certain way in order to be accepted
Yeah.
within that group, right? And it attracts a certain type of person, someone that's willing to
Conform.
assimilate at any cost. They want to be part of the
Yeah.
in group. Now, not saying that they're wrong because of the social economic pressures on the other side, sort of chasing them into this in group. Okay, I don't need any of those headaches. I'm going to try to push myself into closer to this to the in group. So I think we have to find a way, not separate but equal, but find a way to have our own identity while still taking part in the American experiment. And part of that is the dominant society has to accept us in as we are, just like they did with the Italians, just like they did with the Jews to a degree, to the Irish. They got absorbed in to the in group, but they still maintain their individuality or their individual cultures. There's St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
There's plenty of holidays. The Columbus Day for the Italians. I don't know why you celebrate that, but that's something they do. So I just want to be clear that there is a way to be part of American society and to be have your full citizenship and have all the perks and all the responsibilities that go with it, because we got plenty of responsibilities and not all of the perks, and still have our own identity. There is a way, but for some reason, I guess for obvious reasons, they don't. The dominant society doesn't want us to have our own identity. I'm sorry, that didn't answer
Brandon,
your
I want you
question,
to.
Ben, but I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. No, appreciate it. Again, I'm on Brandon. I want you to address it, but I wanted to put it in context as to why I'm asking, because as we described the nefarious nature of how it's being cast as meritocracy now instead of a result of America's own caste system, right? The way we fight back against that right now and historically has been clinging to our culture, which our culture is activism, civil rights, the struggle. That is our culture, right? So how would we ever fight back against this idea that the only problems in the African American community are meritocracy or lack thereof, versus these compelling forces to conform to this homogenized version of America, completely devoid of any connection to our past? How do we balance those two fights?
Well, I think the pressure to conform that comes as part of this sort of respectability politics, this tone policing of blackness, for lack of a better word, the idea that if black people just behaved properly, and properly as a code word for white, they would get ahead, is meant to further reinforce that idea of a meritocracy. It is literally meant to counter the notion that we have a race-based caste system. But so part of tackling this issue is really explaining to people that there is no way for black people to, so for lack of, let's use an example, there is no way for me to be the perfect American male, because part of being the perfect American male is being white. Like, there are certain categories that America has decided makes you the perfect, that are simply unavailable to certain people by nature of their birth. And just that sort of factor, and I mean not just people who may or may not have developmental disabilities, so things like that, but also those people, let's be honest, people like that, people who have a variety of things that they are born with that prevent them from ever being able to reach the upper echelon of what America would consider to be perfect. It is impossible for a black male to be perfect in America, no matter what he does. And the argument that he can be is a cyclical one, because it is meant to both reaffirm the idea of a meritocracy, and so people don't have to feel that kind of white guilt, that the racial baggage from years ago, and also to to basically make a certain group of people feel better about being on top. Like that's really the goal here. It's to make white Americans feel better about being on top because they deserve it. It's not something that was handed to them. They deserve it. Like it's so important that we really emphasize the fact that part of the racial system, that a racist system that America is built upon, encompasses the notion of meritocracy at its core, because that becomes so key to keeping the narrative going, that otherwise people might suffer from something called empathy. Like if you were forced to come to terms with the fact that you are ahead in life, but not only that you are ahead in life, but you are ahead and other people are not getting the bare necessities, would force you to come to terms with the fact that society is not fair, and that might cause you not only to argue against racism, but to argue against capitalism. And I think this is where we get to something like the 80s and 70s and 90s, and we start talking about the ways in which neoliberalism fits into racism, specifically the ways in which identity politics, the right attacked identity politics as a counter to the era of civil rights era in the 60s and 70s, as a way to basically deregulate organizations. That was actually part, and this is a sort of lesser known thing about the attack on identity politics, not the way it exists now, but the way it exists, because back then the caricature that the right made of identity politics then is kind of what it exists as now. But this was a way to justify deregulation and rolling back the powers of the American government. So you say you had people in the government on the right who wanted to deregulate banks, saying that the government is overreaching into your social lives. They are integrating schools. They are giving money to the welfare queen. They are expanding the welfare state. They're giving all of your money to these black people who are, I don't know, smoking joints and chasing white women. My weekend, so I can't speak to the veracity of that for everyone else. This is how I spend my time. But so like this also becomes the way that we get people mobilized against racism. We get people mobilized against sexism by really explaining to them the social cost for everybody that racism has in America. So we really say, do you know why we have such a weak social security system, such a weak welfare system, such a weak unemployment system? Because of racism. Because that was the way in which it was originally justified by Reagan, by Clinton, by all of these legislators.
It goes back to we'll pick up right where you left off, but you said something in there that was critical. You said that the perfect black person is a white person, according to standards, right? There's no amount of fixing that you could do. Ultimately, it's a cyclical force that's going to continue to have you always chasing your tail, trying to become a better person. Ultimately, you will never reach their goal because what they're looking for is a white person. Here's a perfect example of this in reality happening. This week, the black doctor, I'm sure everyone knows the story by now, the OBGYN who was on the flight to Delta, her name was Tamika Cross, Dr. Tamika Cross. Here's a person, a passenger dying, and they ask for a doctor. And she stands up, says, I'm a doctor. And she is immediately dismissed as not being a doctor, despite her saying, I am a licensed doctor. And here we are, somebody's almost dying. And because this person was not seen as someone who could possibly be a doctor, she was dismissed almost to the demise of a person. This shows you, like, here she is. I'm sure she wasn't flying, and not that it would matter, right? I don't care what my doctor is wearing when I'm in need. I don't care if she was wearing whatever. I don't care if she's coming straight from the club, right? But I'm sure she was probably dressed whatever kind of way she was dressed on a flight, dressed professionally or not. She presented herself as a doctor, and she was dismissed as not being one. And you cannot tell me that it was not as a result of her gender and her skin. Her skin first, then her gender, or probably a combination of the equal of the two. So this is a perfect example. Like, we can chase this all we want, but ultimately we'll never reach that level of perfection that they're looking for. Nor do people like me, do I even have time to chase after that. Let's move the conversation forward a little bit. Go ahead, Brandon.
I was gonna say a similar situation happened at a bank, I believe, where there was a black female architect, and the bank simply did not believe her.
Oh yeah,
because of the size of her check.
Yeah, yeah, because the size of her check.
They did not believe her check was.
I mean, but at the same time, it's the manner in which she was dressed was not fitting to that sort of white stereotype of what you have to look like. She was just dressed. I would argue that a lot of black women dress within black society. They dress different from white women. The way white women dress, for who operate in mostly white societies. Just it is what it is.
Right, but now let's be sure. Had it been a white woman who came in there in yoga pants and her workout outfit and her hair all thrown, however it was thrown, they would not have asked her the same questions, right? So yes, there are all kind of forces at play here, but the common denominator across all of them definitely is race.